Welcome to the Explainer. We use websites every single day, but have you ever really thought about what's going on behind the screen? Well, today, we're going to pull back that curtain and build a web page from absolute scratch.
So let's just dive right in, shall we? We're going to explore the fundamental building blocks of the web. We're starting with literally a blank page, a blank text file, and we're going to see how it transforms into a real working website.
Here's how we're going to do it. First, we'll talk about what a web page is actually made of. Then we'll build its skeleton, add some words, style it up with colors and fonts, and finally, get the layout just right. It's a simple, step-by-step process.
Okay, so first things first. What language do we even use to talk to a web browser? How do we tell it what to put on a screen?
The answer to that is HTML, which stands for Hypertext Markup Language. You can think of it as the blueprint for every single web page out there. It's the language that creates the raw structure, the actual bones of the site. It's not about making things look pretty just yet. It's all about telling the browser, hey, this starts a heading, or this bit here is a paragraph.
All right, now it's time to get our hands dirty and start building. And just like any good building, a web page needs a solid foundation, a framework. In the world of HTML, we call this the skeleton. And that skeleton? It's built using these little commands called tags. They're basically just instructions wrapped up in these angle brackets that tell the browser what each piece of content is supposed to be. Now, these are the big four, the essential can't-live-without-them tags that you'll find on literally every web page. The HTML tag wraps the whole document. Then you've got the head, which holds all the behind-the-scenes info, like the page title you see in your browser tab. And finally, the body tag. That's where all the good stuff goes, everything you actually see on the page. And here's what that skeleton looks like in real life. It's clean, it's simple, and believe it or not, this exact structure is the universal starting point for everything from your friend's blog to a giant site like Amazon. Okay, our skeleton is in place, so what's next? Well, now it's time to add some content. This is where we start putting some flesh on those bones, the actual words and sentences people are going to read. Now, to do that, we mainly use two super important tags. First is the paragraph tag, P. It's a container, meaning it has an opening and a closing tag that you wrap around a whole block of text. It also automatically adds some nice spacing. Then you have the line break tag, BR. It's an empty tag, and it does exactly what it sounds like. It just forces the next thing onto a new line, kind of like hitting the Enter key. And check this out. It's a perfect example. On the left, you see the code. We wrapped the company name in a paragraph tag to give it some space, and then used break tags after each line of the address. And on the right, that's exactly how the browser reads that code to create that perfectly formatted address block. Pretty cool, right? But a page full of text would be a mess without some organization. That's where heading tags come in. They range from H1, which is your big main title for the whole page, all the way down to H6 for tiny little subheadings. It's all about creating structure. And here you can really see the code and effect. Those simple heading tags on the left create that super clear descending visual hierarchy on the right. It instantly tells your brain, and just as importantly search engines like Google, what's the most important information on the page. Okay, moving on to section 4, styling with colors and fonts. Our page has structure, it has content, it works, but let's be honest, it's looking a little bland. So now it's time to give it some personality and dress it up with some CSS. So for all the styling, we use a totally different language called CSS, or Cascading Style Sheets. And I love this analogy. If HTML is a skeleton of our page, then CSS is the clothing, the haircut, the makeup. It's everything that makes the page look good.
How a CSS works is by giving us these things called properties that we can apply to our HTML. For our text, for example, we can change its color, we can align it to the left, right, or center, and we can even add decorations like an underline if we want.
And we're not just limited to the text. We can style the background of an element or even the whole page. We can change its color or even put a cool image back there and tell the browser how it should repeat. And of course, we get full control over the fonts themselves. We can pick the font family, like Arial or Times New Roman. We can set the exact font size we want. And we can even control the font weight, which is just a fancy way of saying how bold or thin the text should look. Let's see this in action. Take a look at the code on the left. Inside that H2 tag, we've added a style attribute. This is where we can plug in our CSS properties. We're setting the color to green, the font to Arial, the size to 25 pixels, and centering the whole thing. And the result? That perfectly styled headline you see on the right. We're so close. Our page has structure, content, and style. The very last step, the finishing touch, is to get control over the spacing and positioning of everything on the page.
And the main tool we use for that is the margin property. The easiest way to think about margins is as invisible cushions of space. You can put them around any element you want to push other things away from it.
This is a fantastic final example. See in the body tag on the left, we've set a margin property. That one little line of code tells the browser, hey, put an invisible cushion around all of our content. And that pushes it away from the edges of the window, creating that much cleaner, more professional-looking layout on the right. So to back things up, what's the most crucial takeaway here? It's that building a web page is really a two-part process. You use HTML to build the raw structure and put the content in place with tags for things like headings and paragraphs. Then you bring in CSS to add all the style, the colors, fonts, backgrounds, and spacing that really brings that structure to life.
So there you have it. You now know the fundamental secret of how every single web page you visit is built. It's just a combination of a structural blueprint, the HTML, and a style guide, the CSS. The only question left is, now that you have these building blocks, what are you going to build first?